What's going on, everybody? Welcome in the Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Siepman, and welcome in to our weekly live show. We got a lot to talk about today. We got some draft targets for the Minnesota Vikings, 5 blockbuster trades, and a mailbag to dive into on today's show. But before we do so, if you guys love the Minnesota Vikings, give me a SKOL down below in the comments section. Shout out to Mike Nintendo Master, SKOL Nation in the building, Vikings fan number 1. Card collector. Appreciate you guys tuning in here. I put out a video a couple days ago talking about Aaron Rodgers and just the possibility of him heading to the Minnesota Vikings. So I decided to put it as our live poll today. Would you sign Aaron Rodgers? And a resounding 85% of you guys who answered the poll today said no to the idea of bringing in Aaron Rodgers. Now, listen, I'm probably in the camp of absolutely not. I would not want Rodgers, on the Minnesota Vikings. But the only way I would consider it would be if J.J. McCarthy would have a setback where, let's just say, something happens to that knee and he's going to miss, the first couple of months of the season. Then I would maybe consider bringing in Aaron Rodgers. But still, I'm in the camp of no on this one. But I'll ask you guys this. Would you sign Aaron Rodgers? Time and the Buckeyes saying no. Cole is saying no. Card collector saying no. He has washed more than my dishes. That's a good one. Appreciate you, card collector. Love that. Mike Nintendo saying nope. Yeah, I'm probably good on Rodgers. Now listen, it'll be cool to fulfill the prophecy of former Green Bay Packers legends at the quarterback position who went to the New York Jets and then finished their career with the Minnesota Vikings. But also Rodgers is just not the guy that Brett Favre was when he came to the Minnesota Vikings. Definitely took a step back this past season. Isn't as mobile, obviously, as he once was. But, the only way I would consider it is if J.J. McCarthy would have a setback. Then don't be all in on signing Rodgers because he would at least give you a better chance than a guy like, Daniel Jones or one of these guys that could be the potential backup / bridge quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. But Bluey saying nah. Jay Jetta's production saying no. Christopher saying no. And Ty Man the Buckeye saying, yo, Seeps, what's going on, Ty Man? Thank you so much for tuning in. But we'll dive into here a lot more around the Minnesota Vikings. But first, I want to tell you guys quickly about today's presenting sponsor, and that is Factor Meals. Now, if you guys head to factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off and use that promo code VikingsChat50 off, you guys will get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code VikingsChat50 off at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. And if you guys are ready to optimize your nutrition this season, Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes so you can feel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. But that link is in the live chat right now. But check them out, factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off, and use that promo code VikingsChat50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. So we are going to have a segment on today's show. We're going to be talking about the NFL draft, and we'll actually go through Mel Kiper's big board heading into the 2025 NFL draft. So you guys let me know. Name a draft target for the Minnesota Vikings. My dream guy is Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle for the Michigan Wolverines this past season. Hopefully he's on the board at pick number 24. Also like the idea of a Tyler Booker, offensive guard from Alabama. You need a guy that's going to shore up that interior of the offensive line. But if it's between Kenneth Grant and Tyler Booker, I'd probably lean Kenneth Grant. And maybe I'm just being too much of a prisoner of a moment coming off the Super Bowl, but seeing what that Eagles defensive line did, only rushing 4, and their ability to get home to the quarterback was truly special, and especially in the day and age we're living in where there are a ton of great quarterbacks in the league, and the best way to kind of combat a great quarterback is your ability to get home with 4. And adding a guy like Kenneth Grant on the interior next to Harrison Phillips, and you got the 2 edges on the outside in Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner, and Jonathan Grenard. I don't hate that idea, but my dream target for the Vikes is Kenneth Grant. But you guys let me know yours down below. As Amazing Chaser is saying Travis Hunter. Yeah, unfortunately the Vikings are not in any position to draft Travis Hunter, and with very limited draft capital, I don't think there's a situation where the Vikings trade up. But we'll talk about a potential trade up option to go get Ashton Genty. Bluey saying I would like Amari in Hampton. Big fan of his game. Been watching a lot more of his tape over the past couple of weeks. But Skylar saying Shiloh Sanders. That's a good one. The Wizinator saying Devin Neal late. Love Devin Neal. Big fan of Devin Neal. Dual threat back. I feel like he follows his running lanes extremely, extremely well. And I think that's been an issue for the Vikings running back position over the past couple of years where obviously the Vikings run block game. Has never been like top tier in the NFL, but I feel like they've been good enough to get more production out of that room. And having a guy like Devin Neal, I mean, he would be sweet. Shout out to Thor Nystrom on Twitter. I've been watching a lot of his Devin Neal tape. So him or Caleb Johnson in the third round would be ideal for me. Card Collector saying, I think Jack Sawyer would be cool. I just don't think the Vikings are in a position to draft an edge rusher. Now, Jack Sawyer is a stud. I mean, that play he had against Texas was absolutely awesome. But I just don't think the Vikings are in a position to go draft an edge this year because, you know, Dallas Turner already got kind of fizzled out of the lineup with Van Ginkel and Grenard having a great season. I wonder if the Vikings would consider moving Van Ginkel to more of a, you know, linebacker and then secondary edge role, and then have Dallas Turner, you know, get more than 15, 20 snaps a game, what he was getting this past season. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see how they play it. Skylar saying Emeka Egbuka, not a bad name. We actually are going to be talking about on today's show the idea of the Vikings trading Jordan Addison. So then if they make that call, maybe you could draft a guy like Egbuka potentially in the second round. We'll talk about that Jordan Addison trade coming up on today's show. Vikings fan number one saying trade up for Ashton Jeanty. We're also going to be talking about a trade where the Vikings would trade up to pick number 18 with the Seattle Seahawks and draft Jeanty. The Amazing Chaser saying keep Addison. Yeah, I'm still in the camp of keeping Addison here. But with that 3-game or 4-game suspension looming at the start of next season, I think it's definitely something the Vikings front office is discussing. But again, we'll have to wait and see because also I think any receiver who plays next to Jefferson, their games will be elevated somewhere. You know, if I want to make an NBA comparison, like LeBron back in his heyday when he was the best player in the world, I mean, all those like role players, I mean, some of them looked like all-stars in the NBA because of playing next to LeBron. I think Jefferson has that same effect at that wide receiver position. But let me ask you guys this. This is always a fun one. Name a random Vikings player. So I'm not talking the Adrian Petersons. I'm not talking the Randy Mosses. Name a random Vikings player. I always throw out Sidney Rice as my random guy, considering he had, 1,300 yards back in 2009. Trying to think of another random one, like Phil Loadholt, one of my favorite right tackles for the Vikings. Phil Loadholt would be sweet if we could get him on today's Vikings team. Maybe you could bump Loadholt back in the right guard. But Ronald McDaniel, that's a good one. Jettis, appreciate you. Nate Burleson, that's a good one. Everson Griffin, coming in from SKOL Nation. Vikings fan number one. Who is that guy that threw the Minneapolis Miracle? Case Keenum. Case Keenum's not a bad choice. The Amazing Chaser saying Alan Page, Pat Williams. Yeah, you could throw Kevin Williams in there as well. Ice Castle saying Darnold and Grenard to the Raiders for a shot at Carter at pick number 6. I would not give up Jonathan Grenard to go draft Abdul Carter. And plus, I think Abdul Carter has a better chance of going top 5 than in the positions of 6 to 10 this year in the NFL draft. AI saying Percy Harvin, one of my favorite Vikings of all time. Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs would be a great answer to this question in a couple years. I think Josh Dobbs, I mean, that little 2.5-game run he had with the Vikings 2 years ago was pretty fun to watch. Ben Lieber, it wasn't a pass interference. I love that one from NY. Shout out to you. The Purple Phil saying Robert Smith. That's another good one as well. Yeah, Pat Williams, Kevin Williams. Vikings actually have a chance to recreate the Williams wall. I saw somebody tweet it out where if they go sign Milton Williams, Eagles defensive tackle, then they take Tyleek Williams. They could get that Williams wall back at the interior of the defensive line. GI Wizard saying Teddy Bridgewater. Card Collector saying Brock Lesnar. That's a good one as well. Never forget that training camp run he had with the Minnesota Vikings. Emil saying it sucks being a Vikings fan and living 10 minutes outside of Philly and working in Philly. Yeah, that's a tough one right there. I will say if the Vikings got matched up with the Eagles in the playoffs this season, like if they would have beat the Rams, they would have got their ass handed to them. The Vikings just weren't physical enough to compete with a team like the Eagles. Yeah, that would have been a beatdown. But coming up on today's show, we got a fun one for you guys. So first segment we're going to talk about some Vikings draft targets at some key positions, and we're going to use Mel Kiper's big board to kind of lay out that show. And then also we got some blockbuster trades and then also a mailbag. So if you guys could help us out, I'm trying to get a lot of questions in this mailbag. So if you guys got a question on the Minnesota Vikings or a hot take or just a take you want to get out there on this football team, put it in the live chat and just make sure you guys include hashtag Vikings. You have your name, your profile picture up on screen next to me. These get seen by a lot of Vikings fans. So if you guys want a chance to highlight a show, Get a question in there. Hashtag Vikings in the live chat. Wizinator, Cole, Rick, Card Collector, Purple Filth. If you guys could get a question in there, I would greatly appreciate it. But if you guys are ready to dive into the first segment, if you guys could hit that thumbs up icon. We're at 20 likes right now. Once we get to 30 likes, we can start today's show. So just need 10 more of you guys to hit that thumbs up button. But if you guys could, greatly appreciate it. And remember to get those questions in there. It's going to be a fun mailbag today. We got a lot to talk about on today's show. Vikings fan number one, good example. Just use hashtag Vikings. Get the question in there. As he says, thank you so much. I'm at 150 subscribers now. There we go. My goal was to hit 200, but whatever you shouted me out, I was at 20. Now I'm at 150. Thank you so much. Yeah, no problem, man. Keep on grinding. You get the 200 eventually. Joey Tana, what's going on, man? Appreciate the question. In the draft, we should trade back and get more picks and draft the D lineman and sign Trey Smith and Drew Dahlman, defensive tackle, and free agency. Yeah, that's a great question. We'll dive into that on today's mailbag, but appreciate you, Joey, for getting that question in there. Again, one last reminder, mailbag in about 30 or 40 minutes or so. So use hashtag Vikings in the live chat. You'll get your question up on screen next to me. Shout out to Card Collector. I appreciate you getting a question in there. And if you guys are ready to dive into some draft targets, we just need 2 more likes, and then we will do just that. Yeah, I appreciate you getting that Myles Garrett question in there, Card Collector. That's a trade idea that I've definitely after the Super Bowl, I'm way more open to the idea of giving up some draft capital, maybe giving up Dallas Turner, your first-round pick, going and acquiring one of the best defensive linemen and edge rushers in the National Football League. But Vikings fan number one saying, SKOL to 17-0. I love it. Get the positive vibes going. Saying, Amazing Chaser saying, why are you even considering trading Addison? Biggest reason is he's going to get a contract extension here soon. And listen, I'm not saying, the Vikings, need to trade Jordan Addison. I'm not pounding the table for that. But I think it's something that, Kwesi's talking about. Plus, he's got that suspension looming. I could see it really, maybe coming to fruition. Al saying, Pat, would you sign Holland from Miami, strong safety? I would, but not for the price he is supposed to get. He's supposed to get around $19-20 million a year, and our Dolphins Today host here at Chat Sports said he was extremely overrated this past season. So I don't know if I would be all in on Javon Holland. I would rather just have them go and take a chance on a guy like Theo Jackson, who's already on your roster, young up-and-coming safety who had a big-time performance in that Seahawks game back in Week 16. So I would not want to pay a safety. I want to pay players. My mindset for the offseason and mindset for the Vikings is I want them to pay players that are closer to the football. So the center position, I want to get more funds around the football. Obviously interior of both defensive and offensive line. But if you guys are ready to go, just give me a SKOL down below in the comment section. We got almost 100 people in the building, so I really do appreciate you guys tuning in and watching our live show on the dog days of the offseason. So if you guys are ready to go, just give me a SKOL down below. David Martin saying, I'm a Vikings fan in the UK, and I'm a fan of your channel. It's the best for all the news and stuff. Keep up the good work, man. SKOL, I appreciate that a lot, David. Vikings fan from across the pond. Shout out to you. Alrighty, if you guys are ready to go, let's dive into it. We got some draft targets coming your way for the Minnesota Vikings. AI saying SKOL, Cam Scadaboo for the draft. Don't hate that idea. We'll see. We'll see if they try to go running back in round 3. But let's dive into it. Draft targets from Mel Kiper's big board. Let's dive into it right now. What's going on, everybody? Welcome in the Vikings Now by Chat Sports. I am your host, Patrick Siepman, and coming up on today's show, we're going to be looking at Mel Kiper's latest NFL draft big board and kind of diving into some prospects at key positions of need for the Minnesota Vikings. We'll dive into it on today's show, go over a bunch of names, so stay with us through the entire thing. But first, I just want to address what are the top roster needs on the Minnesota Vikings. So, number one, I think it's interior of the offensive line. I was debating interior O-line or defensive tackle, but this has been an issue for the Minnesota Vikings for the last, 10 seasons it feels like. So this is what I would want to address first in free agency or the draft. Then I go defensive tackle number 2. Then I got cornerback at number 3 with guys like Stephon Gilmore, Shaq Griffin, and Byron Murphy all set to hit free agency. And then I did include running back in this as well, as I think that's a sneaky need on this roster. But also want to look at draft capital for the Vikings. right now it's very limited. I mean, it is only a 4-pick draft for the Minnesota Vikings, so each of these picks are going to be huge. And in round 1, you got the 24th pick. Round 3, you got the 97th pick. Round 5, 139, and another round 5 draft pick at 161. But before we show you Mel Kiper's big board, first I want to say thank you guys so much. We're actually less than 30 subscribers away from 52,000 subs. So if you guys could help us out, reach that next milestone here at Vikings Now by Chat Sports, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. So hit that subscribe button, lock us in. Do not miss a thing around the Minnesota Vikings, and subscribe today. All right, let's dive into Mel Kiper's big board. So I just took from prospect number 16 to 25, since the Vikings have the 24th pick in the draft. Didn't bother showing you guys 1 through 15, but he's got Josh Simmons, an offensive tackle, Mike Green, an edge rusher, Luther Burton, a wide receiver, Elijah Aroro, tight end from Miami. He is a stud. And you also got Malachi Starks, which a lot of mock drafts have the Vikings taking him, but I would be against that. And then specifically pick number 23, Tyler Booker, offensive guard from Alabama. And then Jihad Campbell, linebacker from Bama, and then also Walter Nolan. Watch out for him possibly being a Minnesota Viking at pick number 24, D-tackle from Ole Miss. But, you know, I think this draft is pretty interesting because I think the prospects you could get from pick number 20 to pick number 60 all will relatively have the same draft grade. So it gets me to this thought. I think there's a good chance that the Vikings trade back this season. Like maybe they send away pick number 24 for a team that's desperate to take a quarterback or, you know, a big-time edge rusher. If one of these guys are falling down, I could see the Vikings trading back and then maybe getting a pick at, you know, round 2, round 3, and then just move off pick number 24. But let's first start off with the interior offensive line. As I said, this is the biggest position of need for the Minnesota Vikings. We're going to start off with Tyler Booker here, actually former high school teammate of J.J. McCarthy back when they were at IMG, and this guy is flying up draft boards over the past couple of weeks. He is a mauler at the interior of the offensive line, and this is how PFF graded him out this past season. Overall grade of 66.5, but I love the pass blocking grade, 86.5 grade for him. Run blocking, 63.9. No sacks allowed on the year, which is huge, and he did have 7 penalties, so a little bit of a concern there on that one. But still, if Tyler Booker's the pick at pick number 24, I mean, that would be a huge win for the Minnesota Vikings, considering if they aren't able to land one of the top guys like a Trey Smith in free agency. But this photo was taken after the college football semifinal 2 years ago when J.J. McCarthy retired Nick Saban in that Rose Bowl game, and Tyler Booker and J.J. were dapping each other up after the game, and Booker actually told him to go win it all. So I'm sure J.J. would love the pick of Tyler Booker, but maybe you could check out a guy from Mizzou, and this could be a trade back option where if the Vikings are at pick number 24, get a second-round pick and a third-round pick. Maybe they could go and look at a guy like Armand Membo. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, but the guard out of Missouri had a really solid year for the Tigers, and PFF loved this guy. Graded out extremely, extremely well, and I think he would be a steal in the second or the third round for the Vikes. But 90.4 overall grade, great in the pass block, great in the run block game, and he only had 4 penalties and 827 snaps. So this is, again, you know, if the Vikings aren't able to land one of the top guys in free agency and maybe they allocate some of their funds to the defensive line, then they could look at a guy in the second or third round if they do decide to trade back from that pick at number 24. But also Gray Zabel, he's been flying up draft boards, had a really good appearance at the Senior Bowl as well. North Dakota State guy, and there's something about these North Dakota State offensive linemen that I like a whole lot. And then again, PFF graded him out extremely, extremely well. In 970 snaps this season, he had an overall grade of 90.4. Great in the pass blocking department. Now, yes, this is scaled. He wasn't going against, you know, great competition like these other guys, like in these Power 5 conferences. But I have noticed that Kwesi likes to take a chance on these guys from smaller schools, and maybe Gray Zabel will be another, you know, example of just that. But I also want to talk about Donovan Jackson. Now, this guy's been actually mocked to the Minnesota Vikings quite a bit. Interior offensive lineman from Ohio State. They had one of the most stacked rosters this past season in college football, and he was a big reason why they were so dominant in the run game with, you know, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins at the running back spot for the Buckeyes. But, you know, PFF graded him out about middle of the pack, but keep in mind he's going against Big Ten defensive tackles, so he was squaring off with guys like Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham. He still graded out pretty damn well. So, you know, again, Donovan Jackson, I think it'd be an interesting choice at pick number 24. Probably a little rich there, But, still keep in mind, I think a trade back is definitely in the cards for the Minnesota Vikings. But another guy from Arizona, Jonah Savainia from the Wildcats, played a pretty good season last year. He's another guy. He's getting a lot more love over the last couple of weeks when these guys start really diving into the tape. And, that's what's going to be so interesting, especially with this interior offensive lineman. Like, I'm sure we'll get a couple of guys that just skyrocket up draft boards. But PFF, 738 snaps this past season, 75.9 overall grade, better in the pass blocking department compared to the run blocking department. But the thing I love about Jonah, big body. And I think the Vikings just need to get bigger guys at the offensive line. Like we saw the Eagles, all 5 of their offensive linemen were 350-plus pounds. So kind of want the Vikings to take a page out of Howie Roseman's playbook there a little bit and go get these big interior offensive linemen. But let's kick into the defensive tackle position because Ben Gessling did put out a report that the Vikings will be aggressive when targeting interior offensive linemen in free agency, and Walter Nolan has been mocked to the Vikings, countless a number of times. And I didn't want to talk about Mason Graham because he's just got no chance to fall to the top 10, but I would be a massive fan of Mason Graham if he would wear the purple and gold, but there's just a pretty much 0% chance of that happening. But he had a good year for Ole Miss, 6.5 sacks, 35 pressures. He's also great at getting his hands in passing lanes. That's one thing I was reading about him. Very instinctual player. He's got great, stability at his legs and or below his legs where he can just create that good base, get under. He's great at just attacking leverage at the interior of the defensive line. So watch out for Walter Nolan. But my dream draft pick for the Minnesota Vikings, Kenneth Grant, interior offensive lineman from the Michigan Wolverines. And I feel like Kenneth Grant kind of got a little overshadowed a little bit this past season. Now, he is not the Milton Williams type of interior pass rusher where he is just going to wreak havoc in the pass rush game. He is that prototypical Pat Williams, Kevin Williams type of defensive lineman where he'll take on double team blocks. He'll open up lanes for very athletic linebackers, which the Vikings have in Blake Cashman, in Ivan Pace Jr. So Kenneth Grant, if I had to lock in a guy at pick number 24, it would no doubt be the Michigan defensive tackle. But what about Derek Harmon? So Oregon interior defensive lineman as well, and he had a great showing a couple weeks ago at the Senior Bowl, and he's, again, one of those guys flying up draft boards right now where he was supposed to be a day 2 pick, but now people are talking that he could be a first rounder. And he did have 5 sacks this past season. He's great at exploiting pad leverage, is what I was reading on Derek Harmon. But he's also one of those guys, big body defensive tackle. He is actually 6'5", 310 pounds. So you need one of those maulers at the interior of the defensive line, and Derek Harmon is just that, and he had a great season for the Oregon Ducks over there. But another guy I do want to talk about here, Darius Alexander. Now, this is a guy, played at a small school, played at Toledo, and, maybe I'm just falling in love more with these Toledo prospects after Quinion Mitchell had an awesome season for the Philadelphia Eagles. But Darius, he had a good year, man. 37 pressures from the interior. Actually had a touchdown on the season for Toledo, but 4 PBUs, 1 interception actually from the defensive line. So he has some versatility that would fit in very, very well with Brian Flores. You could randomly see him dropping back in the coverage, 40 tackles, 8 TFLs, and 3.5 sacks. So, listen, I think the Vikings are in an interesting spot here, and I think, we're going to have to wait to see what dominoes fall in free agency because if they go pay a guy like Milton Williams, I don't know if they would target a defensive lineman, but if they go all in on O-line, then definitely D-line becomes a big need. But quickly here on TJ Sanders, interior defensive lineman from South Carolina. He's a stud. I'm a big fan of his game, and this is another guy that will probably go in the 2nd or 3rd round on day 2, and I would love for the Vikings to take him. But 13 games played this season, had 7 tackles for loss, 33 pressures, 4 sacks, 1 PBU, 50 tackles on the season for TJ. Big body in the interior of the defensive line, and he would be another guy where I think the Vikings need to add some more physicality, and he would do just that. But we just went over some interior offensive linemen and defensive linemen. I said my dream pick is Kenneth Grant, but you guys let me know, who is your dream draft pick for the Minnesota Vikings at pick number 24? You guys let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, whether it's Kenneth Grant, Benjamin Morrison, which we'll talk about him here in a little bit. But you guys let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Now we'll get the more draft targets for your Minnesota Vikings here in a second, but first, I got to tell you guys about today's presenting sponsor, and that is Factor, and eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off, and use code VikingsChat50OFF to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code VikingsChat50OFF at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50OFF to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Now, if you guys are ready to optimize your nutrition this year, Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes so you can feel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, and it's perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. Here, covering the Minnesota Vikings at Chat Sports, we have some long days, and I don't always feel like making full-blown home-cooked meals when I get off work, and that's where Factor stepped in, and it's completely changed my life. I love their teriyaki chicken. I love their Louisiana shrimp, and I promise you guys will as well. So eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50OFF and use that promo code VikingsChat50OFF to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. It's code VikingsChat50OFF at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50OFF to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right, let's keep moving along here to the cornerback position. We're going to talk about a guy who, again, has been mocked to the Vikings a whole lot, and that's Benjamin Morrison. Now, he only played in 6 games this past season for the Fighting Irish, but he is a stud, man. He would have been the best cornerback in the country if he stayed healthy this past year, but he did have 4 PBUs, only allowed 125 yards in 6 games. So fantastic stuff. But what I love about him, he also offers some versatility. You can blitz him off the edge. We saw that a whole lot with ND this past season. I think if Brian Flores had to make the pick at number 24, he would probably go Benjamin Morrison. And again, let's just say the Vikings do decide not to bring back Byron Murphy. Cornerback becomes a massive need for the Vikings heading into the draft. But let's talk about a little bit of a sleeper here. Maxwell Hairston. Big fan of his game, extremely physical corner. Now, he is a little more raw than some of these other guys we're going to talk about, so it could take him a year or two to develop. But he also dealt with injuries this past season, only played in 7 games, but still gave up only 262 yards in just 7 games played this past year. 5 PBUs, 1 interception. Definitely an interesting prospect coming out of Kentucky. And you also got to think about, like, Mekhi Blackmon. He's also a sleeper at the Vikings cornerback spot to potentially, get more run this upcoming year. But let's just say the Vikings at pick number 24, they trade back, get a 2nd and a 3rd rounder, and they re-sign Byron Murphy. Then you got Mekhi Blackmon coming up. Then you just have that rookie cornerback be your CB3. I don't hate the idea there. But a Texas guy, cornerback, Jahdae Barron. Now, again with him, very raw, is going to need some time to develop, but I do love his game. And Mel Kiper is a big fan of his game as well. And, he played in 16 games this past season. He was healthy throughout the whole thing, and he had an awesome year for the Longhorns. 279 yards given up in just 16 games played. I'm a big fan of him. Did not allow a single touchdown this past season, 16 PBUs, 5 interceptions, extremely versatile guy as well, but he would need some more time to develop. But, again, cornerback could be a big need for the Minnesota Vikings. And how about Quincy Riley, Louisville cornerback here? Now, Quincy Riley, he is a guy for Louisville that was, played all over the lot for him. He played in multiple positions, but he's a 6-foot corner, weighing about 200 pounds. I like his versatility. He actually started off at Middle Tennessee State. Then he transferred to Louisville, and over the last 3 seasons, he has been very consistent. Had 3 interceptions in 22, 3 interceptions in 23, 2 interceptions in 2022 as well. And he offers you some versatility at that cornerback position. And also, he was born and raised in South Carolina as well. So, yeah, only 9 PBUs or 15 PBUs this past season for Louisville. But another guy from a smaller school, Siobhan Revelle Jr. Now, he was getting a lot more love before the last couple of weeks. People were talking about him going round 1. Now I'm seeing him mocked more in round 2. And, he had a pick 6 this past season. Pretty solid corner. But, again, more on Revelle. I think what stands out with him compared to these other guys is he's 6'3", 193 pounds. So he's a long, lanky corner. Kind of reminds me of Xavier Rhodes just a little bit back with the Minnesota Vikings. And I think the Vikings definitely do have a need for just a bigger corner. And I think Flores, especially when he's dropping back into those zones, you want much more lanky guys that can get over the top and just, lock up certain areas on the field. But that's where it's at the cornerback position. Now let's talk about some running back draft targets for the Minnesota Vikings. So I did not include Ashton Jeanty in this list just because I think it's unlikely that he does fall to pick number 24. But what about Amari and Hampton here? Had a solid season with North Carolina. This is a guy a lot of these draft nerds absolutely love. Coming out of UNC this past season, has some versatility, can catch the ball in the passing game. He had 38 receptions, and what I love about him, no fumbles. Will not put the ball on the deck, but over 1,600 yards, 5.9 yards per carry. Definitely a guy I would be interested in. But also another guy, Dylan Sampson. Now, this is the burner in this year's draft. He's going to probably end up running a 4.3 40. Again, has some versatility at that position as well. 20 receptions on the season. And, he does have some sort of a fumbling issue. 4 fumbles on the year, but 1,400 plus yards this past season on 258 carries. And, again, he's a guy, round 2 or round 3. I would be all in on the Vikings drafting him. But what about a little Quinshon Judkins here? Now, he split time with Travion Henderson. We'll talk about Henderson here in a little bit, and I'll actually give you guys a quick pro comp for Henderson. I actually see a lot of Dalvin Cook in his game, but Quinshon Judkins had another monster year for the Buckeyes. 16 total touchdowns, over 1,000 yards, average 5.5 yards per carry. He kind of reminds me of Isaiah Pacheco, the way he runs, very physical, breaks arm tackles very easily, but Travion Henderson's actually the Ohio State running back I like more. And the biggest reason for that, he is elite in the blitz pickup. And with the Vikings, they were rolling out C.J. Ham this past season to be their third down running back. You would just have Travion Henderson be that guy. And the way he runs reminds me a lot of Dalvin Cook. Physical runner, does have that breakaway speed. He is more of a one-move guy where he'll just put his foot in the ground, get north and south. But the one negative on Travion, he's got a lot of carries under his belt. So how long will his NFL career be? TBD. But again, if he's the pick in the third round, I'll be thrilled about it. But another guy I would love, and this guy's definitely moving up my draft boards here, is just a pure running back, Caleb Johnson. Now, he really was not supposed to be drafted before this year, and then he had a monster year for the Hawkeyes, playing over there in Iowa. Has dual threat ability, 22 receptions, 23 total touchdowns on the year, but check out that yards per carry, everybody. 6.4 yards per clip. Great stuff from Caleb Johnson. Big fan of his game. 240 carries, and if you could somehow double up, go Tyler Booker round 1, Caleb Johnson in round 3, I think it'd be a great move for the Minnesota Vikings. But hey, if you guys made it to the end of today's show, longer video today, just really want to dive into a lot of these draft prospects that the Vikings could draft. But if you guys made it to the end, just give me a SKOL down below in the comment section so I can know where all the real ones are at and all the real ones that watch this entire YouTube video. But also, I am on Twitter. Give me a follow over there. At Pat Sieps is a Twitter handle. If you guys give me a follow over there, I'll give you guys a follow right back. But we'll see you guys next time. As always, SKOL Vikes. Alrighty, what's going on, everybody? We just dove into a whole lot of draft prospects on that show. And just some key positions for the Minnesota Vikings. But we just gave you guys a lot. You guys just got to give me one right now. Who is your dream draft pick at pick number 24 if the Vikings do decide to stay there? As Scholar saying, hashtag Vikings, I think Minnesota should look at Donovan Edwards. I think it'd be another Danny Woodhead. Listen, I love Donovan Edwards. The only thing is he kind of took a step back this past season. He didn't look like he was during his junior campaign. So I wonder if he's dealing with some injuries or if maybe just all those miles he has on those legs are catching up to him a little bit. But SKOL Nation saying Benjamin Morrison. Love that pick as well. Interesting spot because pick number 24, you could probably get the same value at pick number 40 in this year's draft. But if, again, I will stand by it. If the Vikings love a guy at pick number 24, you just go ahead and take him. Even if a team is offering you a second and third round pick, just take that guy. But also I could see the Vikings, because you guys remember when the Vikings got their other first round pick from the Houston Texans, they had to give up 2 seconds. Like, I wonder if a team who was trying to trade up for a quarterback could view the Vikings as a team, hey, they have very limited draft capital. We'll send them 2 seconds. And then the Vikings would have an extra second for next season. So I'd be curious to see how Kwesi plays that whole thing. But we will have a mailbag here in about 20 minutes or so. So if you guys got a question for me, get those in the live chat right now. Hashtag Vikings. Or if you guys want to super chat to support the show, that's another great way to do so. We really appreciate it. We actually have a whole bunch of new studios being built in at the Chat Sports offices right now. And you guys super chatting is a great way to help us kind of expedite that process here. So if you guys could want to send in a super chat, it would be greatly, greatly appreciated. But also make sure you guys get those questions in there. Hashtag Vikings. And coming up next, we're going to go over some wild trade ideas. So once we get 2 more likes, we're at 48 likes right now. If we get 2 more likes, we'll dive into that show. As Carpenanzo is saying, trenches, please. I agree with you on that. You got to address the trenches this offseason. I think the Eagles, like if you weren't already all in on the Vikings going big on interior and defensive line, watch the Eagles game or watch the Super Bowl. Eagles dominated in the trenches. But we just crossed over 50 likes. If you guys are ready to go, let's dive into 5 wild trade ideas for the Minnesota Vikings. What's going on, everybody? Welcome in the Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Siepman, and coming up on today's show, we are getting wild because we are in the dog days of the offseason. So I wanted to have some fun and go through 5 wild trade ideas that this man right here, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, maybe could pull off during the NFL offseason. So we'll dive into that on today's show. But before we do so, if you guys want the Vikings to make a splash this offseason, just go down there, hit that thumbs up icon, and put today's goal as 300 likes. So if you guys could help me blow that out of the water, make me look good for my bosses, hit that thumbs up icon, whether it's free agency, the draft, or the trade market. If you guys want the Vikes to make a splash, just go down there and hit that thumbs up icon. All right, let's dive into it. 5 blockbuster trades for our Minnesota Vikings. And number 1 here, we're going to get possibly the best defensive player in the league, Myles Garrett. Now, Myles Garrett did officially request a trade from the Cleveland Browns, so the Browns are looking to deal him. So what could a trade look like? Well, the Vikings could just send Dallas Turner, first-round pick from last season, your 2025 first-round pick, and your 2025 third-round pick. Is this enough to get this done? TBD, but I'm sure the Browns, if they move off Garrett, they would want a young up-and-coming edge rusher to fill that spot. So I could see them having some interest in Dallas Turner, and plus you give him a first-round pick and a third-round pick. But originally I wasn't too high on a Myles Garrett trade, but after watching the Super Bowl, I am all in on the Vikings trading for Myles Garrett because there are so many good quarterbacks in the NFL. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes. And what's the best way to beat those guys is your ability to get home with 4, drop 7 in the coverage, and it's just a numbers game at that point because you think about it, 5 offensive linemen, you got the 6 guy as the quarterback. If you're able to get home with 4, you just have such an advantage on the back end. And Myles Garrett has been just consistently great. Each of the last 4 seasons having 14-plus sacks and 17-plus TFLs. He has been awesome. And, I can already see people saying, we got Van Ginkel, we got Grenard. Why would we want to trade for Myles Garrett? Myles Garrett is significantly better than both of those guys. I love Grenard. He's a true blue chipper at that edge position. But could you imagine when you're squaring off with teams like the Lions, Packers, and Bears, all of these explosive offenses, and you got Myles Garrett, Jonathan Grenard coming off the edge, meeting at the quarterback. Like, you could truly replicate the Purple People Eaters from back in the day. So Myles Garrett, I'd be all in on it, but we'll have to wait and see if the Vikings are seriously looking to trade for that star edge rusher from Cleveland. All right, let's dive into blockbuster trade idea number 2 here. And this is the Vikings actually trading up in the first round to draft Ashton Jeanty, Boise State running back. So I think the situation could be you call the Seattle Seahawks. You're trying to move up 6 spots. You throw in a second-round pick in 2026. And the Seahawks, they could be wanting more draft capital in future drafts to trade up for a quarterback. So I could see them being down to trade down. But if the Vikings could somehow get their hands on this guy, it would be awesome. Ashton Jeanty, runner-up from the Heisman this past season, had over 370 carries going for 2,600 yards. He is a great prospect. Do I think he's on the level of a guy like Saquon Barkley or Christian McCaffrey coming out of college? No, but he's just below that. And I could see the Vikings seriously consider, going out there and getting a star running back for the main reason of you would complete this offense and you would almost have it look like a San Francisco 49ers-esque offense. And, I'll also say this, if you're the Minnesota Vikings and you think Ashton Jeanty is a generational prospect where he would completely change the look of this offense, you go and make this trade. Because I understand Kwesi's kind of put himself behind the 8 ball with his draft capital, trading up for Dallas Turner. You only had to give up a 4th to trade up 1 spot with the New York Jets to draft J.J. McCarthy. But if you truly think Ashton Jeanty is that great and that much of a generational prospect, you go ahead and make this trade. Because could you imagine you rolling out a unit on offense? I mean, just check this out. Like, could you imagine you have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Ashton Jeanty, TJ Hawkinson, and Christian Darrisaw? That's probably the best 2 wide receiver, running back, tight end, 1 offensive lineman combo in the entire NFL. And I still believe Kwesi is trying to replicate what the Niners had with Brock Purdy on that rookie deal, where you just have a loaded cast of Avengers around him. And Jeanty, I mean, he is the cream of the crop in a loaded running back class. But if you really believe he is generational, I think I would do it. But I'll ask you guys this. Would you trade up for Ashton Jeanty? Give me a T for trade or give me a P for pass down below in the comment section. You guys let me know your thoughts. Would you trade up for the Boise State running back? This is your time to sound off down below in the comment section. Give me a T for trade or a P for pass. All right, everybody relax. We are going to just talk about the idea of trading Jordan Addison. I am not saying the Vikings should trade Jordan Addison, so before you guys kill me in the comment section, just pump the brakes a little bit. We're just going to talk about the idea. In this hypothetical trade, you had the Vikings landing the 35th pick in this year's draft for Jordan Addison. So why would the Vikings consider trading Addison? Well, he does have that looming suspension. Probably going to be around 3 or 4 games to start next season, and he is expected to get paid. Probably not this offseason, but you're going to have to pay him next offseason. And in terms of just building a roster, would you want the Vikings to pay the receiver position? Like, let's say Jefferson getting his 35, then Addison's getting 25, possibly 30 a year. Do you want to pay 60 to 65 million per year for the receiver position? I don't know if that's something Kwesi wants to do. But let's just say you do trade him for pick number 35, and let's just say you get a guy like Tyler Booker at pick number 24, then you could just go get one of these guys, like a Caleb Johnson, a Benjamin Morrison, a Travion Henderson, or Derek Harmon. And also, if you want to say, hey, we could draft a receiver at 25, I don't hate that idea. But also somebody that could replace Jordan Addison. What about a guy like Cooper Kupp? Now, the Rams, they're trying to trade this guy, but I firmly believe they would not be able to get a trade done considering his cap number. So he could be a free agent once the Rams cut him. He already has familiarity with Kevin O'Connell and this Vikings team. Maybe, just maybe, they sign Cooper Kupp, get a draft pick for Jordan Addison, and that's where they go. But again, I would not trade Addison. That's not what I'm saying, so don't kill me in the comment section. Just want to have some fun on today's show. But what about blockbuster trade number 4 here? I talked about this on a show recently, and you guys were killing me in the comment section saying there's no chance we should trade Sam Darnold in a tag and trade for Mathew Stafford. But if you guys remember, there was some buzz back in October. Jack Settleman works for Underdog. He tweeted this out. He never really breaks stories, so I thought this was interesting, him just kind of putting this out there on the table, saying sources, the Vikings and Rams are in serious trade talks for Mathew Stafford. Minnesota made a push to trade for Stafford this offseason, but now are revisiting with the idea that he can be the piece to help them win the Super Bowl. But for the team trading for Stafford, this would be the cap hit. So, we talk about, Darnold, we don't want to pay him $41 million. But would you pay Mathew Stafford in 2025, $27 million, and then in 26, $31 million? That's something you would have to consider. But I already can see the comments. J.J. McCarthy's our guy, and I totally agree with you. I'm not saying I would 100% trade Darnold for Stafford, but let's just dive into some pros and cons. Because even though I'm probably the biggest J.J. McCarthy guy that you guys will see, Stafford gives you a better chance to win now. And maybe the Vikings view this roster as a win now, like win literally next season. We're going to try to win the Super Bowl. That's a pro to this. But also a con, Stafford, not the same guy he once was. He's, I don't want to say he's cooked. That's why I put a question mark there. But you could make the argument that Stafford is cooked. And then another pro, offense familiarity. He's running the same offense with McVay that Kevin O'Connell runs. But also a con, you need to go big on interior offensive linemen. So if, let's just say hypothetically this trade goes down, I'm sending Trey Smith and Drew Dahlman the bag this offseason. And another pro, you got to think about your best player on your team, Justin Jefferson. I mean, he would have a monster year with Stafford, considering Stafford and Kupp back in 2021 had the best quarterback wide receiver tandem year we have possibly ever seen. I could really see Jefferson being on board with this, but again, I'm probably not making this trade just because I think J.J. McCarthy's our guy. Now, let's talk about trade number 5. You guys are going to get a kick out of this. I saw this floated out there. The Las Vegas Raiders, with Tom Brady now being a minority owner, maybe he wants to swing the Michigan quarterback, JJ, for pick number 6. And I have not a lot to say about this, except for this. No, just no. I am so sick and tired of seeing, and it's not any Vikings YouTubers or Vikings media guys throwing these trade ideas out there. There are so many NFL insiders who are too good at their job to keep throwing out their J.J. McCarthy trade ideas. I don't care if the Titans offer you the number 1 pick. I am not trading this guy for anything because the most valuable thing in the NFL in terms of roster construction is having a quarterback on a rookie deal. You do not trade that just because technically you would get more value since you had him at pick 10. You could, upgrade that pick to pick number 1 or pick number 6. There are just way too many smart NFL insiders that keep throwing out a J.J. McCarthy trade. I promise you, if the Vikings don't swing big on a guy like Stafford this offseason, which I think has less than a 1% chance of happening, number 9 will be under center taking snaps for the purple and gold this season. So enough with the J.J. McCarthy stuff, and let's show him some love to wrap up today's show. Spam his jersey number down below in the comment section. Type those number 9s if you guys believe in J.J. McCarthy being the guy to get the Minnesota Vikings over the hump. Now, if you guys also want to hit me up on Twitter, that's the handle right there, at Pat Sieps. Give me a follow over there. I'll give you guys a follow right back. But thank you guys so much for watching today's show. Blockbuster trades. It was fun to dive into. So appreciate you guys watching this whole thing. Hit me up on Twitter, at Pat Sieps. See you guys next time. As always, SKOL Vikes. Alrighty, if you guys are a believer in J.J. McCarthy, give me those 9s down below. What's going on, Z Cool? Good to see you in the building. Good old friend. How you doing? David Martin typing 9. Emil saying, why draft JJ if you're scared to let him play? Commanders, Broncos, Patriots, Falcons, Bears, all let the rookies quarterback play. Exactly. I'm just shocked at amount of the Tom Pelisseros, Adam Schefters, these guys just still will just randomly toss in an article. Oh, maybe the Vikings could re-sign Darnold and trade J.J. McCarthy. I just don't understand it. But hey, we'll see. Even though I doubt it's gonna happen. But shout out to Purple Filth, Ice Castle, and Jaden, all in the comments section. But we are going to be getting into a mailbag here, and we need a couple more questions. So if you guys could, hashtag Vikings in the live chat. Z-Cool, I need a couple questions from you. If you could help us out here. Jason, Rock Hard, if you guys could, get those questions in there. We're going to dive into this mailbag here in a couple of minutes. Bluey saying, would you consider the Addison trade if it was for Jeremiah Smith? 100%. I think Jeremiah Smith might be the best wide receiver prospect we have ever seen. What he did at 18 years old this past season was phenomenal. He reminds me a lot of A.J. Brown and that DK Metcalf, big physical freak athlete, but he's also more of a polished route runner than those guys were coming out. But again, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Skylar, great question on Tyreek Hill. Trade first-round pick for Tyreek Hill. Interesting conversation. We'll see. We'll see. I'll give you more thoughts on that in our mailbag. But DDD, what's going on, man? Do you think the latest reports that Bynum more like – I saw this. I'm going to probably do a video on this tomorrow. I think it was Jeremy Fowler said the Vikings are more likely to re-sign Cam Bynum than Byron Murphy. Completely disagree with that. And also, I don't know if that's true because everything I'm hearing coming out of the Vikings organization is that they prefer to keep Byron Murphy over Cam Bynum. I love Bynum. He's awesome. The dances are sweet. I do think he's a little overrated, though, especially for us Vikings fans. I don't know. I would 100% choose to pay Byron Murphy over Cam Bynum. But if Byron Murphy wants $22 million a year, I almost think you got to let him walk as well. But we'll see. We'll see if these guys, maybe they take a little hometown discount. Like if Bynum signs a deal where it's $9 million a year, I'd be all in for it. Cole Olek coming in with a $5 super chat. Appreciate you, my man. We can actually just start the mailbag off with that. If you're cool with that, Cole. Yeah, I love that question. We'll start the mailbag off with that, but I appreciate you. Everybody give me a SKOL Cole down below in the comment section. Show him some love. But if you guys are ready to go, let's dive into this mailbag. What's going on, Vikings fans? Welcome in the Vikings Now by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Patrick Siepman. Coming up on today's show, it's my favorite video I make every week where we answer your guys' questions from the Vikings Now faithful around the latest on the Minnesota Vikings. So can't wait to dive into it. So we appreciate you guys tuning in for today's mailbag. And we're actually going to start off with a super chat that came in on our live show coming in from Cole saying, love the Devin Neal pick. Arguably the most underrated running back in this year's draft, in my opinion. I agree with you, Cole. He also said if it came down to only getting one, would you rather get Dahlman to replace the center position or Becton/Smith to replace one of the guard positions? I would honestly probably rather lean, Cole, going the Becton and Trey Smith route over going Dahlman, because I understand Garrett Bradbury extremely frustrated with how he's played over the last couple of years. Yes, you could save about $5 million cutting Bradbury, but I would rather have them shore up that guard spot, because there's also the center draft is actually a lot deeper than some people think. So you could draft a guy in the 5th round. Hopefully he ends up, beating out Bradbury if he ends up playing well enough. But Cole, if I'd say if you're only getting one, I'm going to go Mekhi Becton. I'm a big fan of his. Big body. I feel like the Eagles got him right, and he was a former first-round pick for a reason. So, Cole, I appreciate the super chat. Shout out to you. What's up, Z Cool? Coming in with the next question saying, #Vikings. How much does the culture of an organization play in the trading and players' attitude to stay? I think it plays a huge part because, the NFL career is a lot shorter than obviously an NBA career. And I feel like these guys don't want to waste time playing for, poor organizations. Like, you think about like a guy like Robert Hunt this past season, signed a 5-year, $100 million deal with the Carolina Panthers. Yeah, he got the bag, but is he going to be playing in any big-time games over the next couple of years? Absolutely not. And plus, I think think about the Kevin O'Connell locker room speeches. They go viral every single week. Like, I'm sure other players in the league who are in terrible organizations are looking at that being like, man, I want to go be a part of that organization. I want to go play for the Minnesota Vikings and Kevin O'Connell. So, Z-Cool, I think it plays a bigger part than I think us fans and media members think, because I think we think it probably just plays a small role, but I actually think this plays a bigger role than a lot of us could imagine. But Z-Cool, as always, appreciate you. DDD, what's going on? Do you think the latest reports that Bynum more likely to stay than Murphy are correct? I have no idea what to think about that. I mean, Jeremy Fowler came out with this report, so I'm sure he heard it from somebody. But if I was making the decision, I would much rather keep Byron Murphy than Cam Bynum, because, my whole kind of motto this offseason is I want to pay guys that are closer to the football. And the safety position is the furthest position away for the football. I'm not saying they don't matter, but I think it is one of the most least valuable and least impactful positions in the NFL. And I'm a big Theo Jackson fan. I would rather have the Vikings just elevate him. Even if Harrison Smith retires, you just have Theo Jackson, Josh Metellus. Maybe you sign a guy on a minimum deal to kind of be that third rotational guy. That's how I would play it. But if you let Byron Murphy walk, that's telling me in free agency, you are tossing a ton of money at that cornerback spot, and you're probably going to have to draft a guy. So I'm hoping that this report is not true, considering the depth we have at safety is extremely underrated, and maybe that's what Fowler's not really seeing. He doesn't know a guy like Theo Jackson as well as us Vikings fans do, but I would much rather have them pay Byron Murphy over Cam Bynum. Astro, what's going on? Do you think it's a good idea to get Will Johnson and trade some draft picks for him and get an RB in the 2nd round? So, talking about trading up for Will Johnson, Will Johnson's a stud, playmaker at the cornerback position. I just don't know if the Vikings are in a position to trade up that high, considering he is probably going to go top 10, and that would probably take a future first to go trade up for him. And I don't think the Vikings are in a position to do that. But let's just say, you trade up for Will Johnson, get a 2nd-round pick, then you draft a running back. I would be cool with that. But, again, you would have to trade up into the top 10. I don't know if the Vikings have enough ammo to do so. But in terms of bringing Will Johnson to Minnesota, would have to be all in on that. But we'll get to more questions here in a second. But first, I got to tell you guys about today's presenting sponsor, and that is Factor Meals. Now, if you guys want to start eating smart this year, eat smart with Factor, and get started at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50off and use code VikingsChat50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code VikingsChat50off at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Now, if you guys are ready to optimize your nutrition this year, Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. And they're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. So you can feel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. In Factor, it arrives fresh, fully prepared, and it's perfect for any busy and active lifestyle. Here covering the Minnesota Vikings, We have some long days here, and I don't always feel like making some home-cooked meals when I get off work, and that's where Factors came in and has completely changed my life. I love their chicken Alfredo, their Louisiana shrimp, their teriyaki chicken. It is all fantastic. So if you guys want to try to lose some weight, eat healthy, do it with Factor. And get started at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off. Use promo code VikingsChat50 off to get 50% off your first box, plus free shipping. That's code VikingsChat50 off at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off to get 50% off, plus free shipping on your first box. Skyler dropping a bombshell question here. Trade the first-round pick for Tyreek Hill. I'm going to probably lean no on that. And also, Tyreek Hill kind of walked back his trade request. But for a team trading for Tyreek Hill in 2025, so you take his base salary plus his roster bonus, I guess it would only be on the books for $11 million. But I think Tyreek, do you want to give up your first-round pick for your wide receiver 3? Now, if the Vikings somehow traded Jordan Addison, got Tyreek Hill as your wide receiver 2. I mean, what a fun combination that would be if Tyreek and Justin Jefferson at the wide receiver position. But he would also be on the books for $35 million in 2026. Do the Vikings want to deal with that contract? Do you want to deal with the noise around Tyreek Hill? I think it makes a whole lot of sense if you're playing Madden and you're making an ultimate team. But for the Minnesota Vikings, I don't know if that would be, the best call. The Purple Filth, how's that hanging? Saying #Vikings. Is it possible to trade down at 24 and get a later first-round pick and second, or is that too much to ask? It would probably have to be like the Chiefs or the Eagles giving you their first and maybe a future second. I don't know if they would give you a first and second in this year's draft. I think the trade would most likely be let's just say the Patriots at pick number 35. Their second-round pick, they want to hop back into their first round, get a prospect they like, then they give you their second and their third-round pick, high-up picks, then the Vikings trade back. I think that's more likely. But getting a first and a second for pick number 24, I'm going to say it's too much to ask, but hey, if Kwesi was able to pull that off, I think it would be a steal. But Purple Filth, I appreciate you. Abby SKOL coming in saying, assuming Sam walks, would you bring back Kirk Cousins if he is a free agent to back up JJ? I'm going to say 110%. Because Kirk will probably take a Russell Wilson-esque deal where it's 1 year, $2 million. He loves the Minnesota area. I could see Kirk having, some interest there. And, also JJ, he had a knee surgery year 1. You give yourself some injury insurance there where even if JJ were to have to go down, you would have a solid guy to throw in there. And Kirk also, there was a report came out that he was dealing with an elbow and shoulder injury this past season, which was a big reason why his play declined. So I think Kirk is a little, underrated right now because people just think he's a completely cooked product. I don't necessarily think that's true, but to back up J.J. McCarthy on a $2 million deal, I mean, I would rather take that than, a guy like Daniel Jones. Card Collector saying, #Vikings, what do you think is going to happen to our defense next season with a lot of people on one-year deals? Great question here. I think you're going to have to address that cornerback spot. You're going to have to address that defensive line spot. But, you're good at a lot of the key positions, though. I still think you're good at safety. You're obviously good at linebacker with Blake Cashman and Ivan Pace. And you're good at the edge rusher spot. And if you just can re-sign Murphy, maybe you go add another corner in the draft or free agency. You go add a defensive lineman. That's really how you're going to shore up that defense. But I think the Vikings defense next season actually could look a lot better. As this year, I feel like they had around B-level talent, but they played like an A group, where maybe next season you have A- talent. You play like an A-plus unit, possibly one of the better ones in the National Football League. But appreciate the question, Card. And then Joey Tana coming in saying, which running back do you like out of Ohio State? Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. I'm a big Travion fan, mainly because he's great in the blitz pickup. He's got some dual threat ability, so if I had to choose one, I would go Travion. But, Judkins is a great running back at the goal line, very physical runner. Kind of reminds me of Isaiah Pacheco a little bit in the way he runs with such physicality. But Travion Henderson, he kind of reminds me of Dalvin Cook. And if he's a pick in the third round, unlikely that he falls to you at pick number 90-something, whatever the Vikings have. But again, I would probably go Travion Henderson, but he's also getting first-round buzz, so I don't know if the Vikings are in any spot to take him. Jay Jetta's production saying, #Vikings, what do you think is the best possible trade the Vikings could make? I'm going to go the Myles Garrett trade. We actually got a trade built kind of headlining that, but it would be necessarily Dallas Turner, your first-round pick, and your third-round pick, and you could go acquire Myles Garrett. That's probably the only trade I would want the Vikings to make because, one, you're getting a blue-chip player. Two, you're not giving up as much draft capital as you would think for a Garrett trade because most other teams, like the Bills, are probably offering 2 first-round picks. Yeah, that's probably the only trade I would be thrilled for the Vikings, making this offseason. But if you guys made it to the end of today's show, just give me a SKOL down below in the comment section. Want to know where all the real ones are at. So if you guys could, drop those SKOLs down below in the comment section. And also, you guys can hit me up on Twitter. That's a handle right there, at Pat Sieps. Give me a follow over there. I'll be tweeting about the Vikings all offseason long. So if you guys could, give me a follow over there. We'll see you guys next time. As always, SKOL Vikes. Alrighty, we appreciate you guys tuning in to today's live show. Mr. Rick, what's going on? How you doing? Purple Phil saying SKOL. James saying, I feel safety is a big need this offseason after offensive line. Yeah, I mean, I'm just a big Theo Jackson guy, so that's why I don't really necessarily think it's as big of a need. But Ant coming in with $2 super chat, we appreciate you. Saying, explain Hockenson and Oliver are 2 different tight ends. They're polar opposite tight ends. Hawk, that prototypical pass-catching tight end, and Josh Oliver, put his hand in the dirt, run-blocking guy. I still like that tandem. I would hope that potentially Hockenson would restructure. Looking back on that Hockenson trade and extension, I actually think that was a bad move by Kwesi, just considering like how often these tight ends are coming out and they're hitting at an all-time rate, like Sam Laporta, Brock Bowers. All these guys are really solid, and they're being very impactful year one. But we're actually going to sign off here, so I do want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's live show. Just about 1,000 of you guys tune in today, so we appreciate you. Dog days of the off season. Cool, great seeing you as well. So we'll see you next time. But yeah, dog days of the off season right now, so a lot of reckless shows coming your guys' way. But we're gonna get on out of here. See you guys next time. SKOL Vikes.